What up? Welcome back to the More Than a Minute podcast. We are Isaac and Dez. It's an exciting weekend, but by the time you see this video, it's going to be our anniversary. Yes, we're posting this video on our anniversary. We are celebrating how many years? I'm just kidding. I
was going to say, you tell me.
We're celebrating 12 years of marriage. So we wanted to make a different kind of video to kind of celebrate our anniversary. And we want to give out some marital tips. So we want to give you 12 tips for the 12 years we have been married. I don't know why I'm super excited today. I don't know if it's because we made it to another year. So 12 years and 12 marriage tips that have helped us that we personally follow. We hope that it could be a blessing to you, and maybe you could apply some of these for your marriage as well. Maybe it'll help. I don't know, but we just gonna throw them out there, and whoever catches them, yeah. So some of these we have actually talked about in other videos, so we're probably just gonna skim through them real quick, or unless y'all want to watch a 45-minute video. Tip number 1, learn to grow together because you can grow apart. So this involves growing together in a relationship, whether you're trying to get healthy. Sometimes it's easier to get healthy when you're trying to do it together. Because I remember I was I needed to do more activities with you. So instead of just trying to grow myself, I was no, I gotta take her with me. We gotta grow together. So that was my whole ideal, years ago when God told me, you either grow together or you grow apart. Learn to grow together and learn to do things together.
And like Isaac said, some of this stuff is stuff that we've mentioned because I think we talked about this a little bit in our video about supporting each other.
Yes.
Because obviously, as husband and wife, as a couple, we should be growing together. We both recognize that each other has a call that has been placed on our lives from God. And so me having that in mind for Isaac and kind of knowing what his calling is, I have to be okay with allowing him the room to grow in that. And same with him. He has to be okay with allowing me to grow. I'm still learning the things that I'm called to do.
Yes. I'm
kind of just finding them along the way. And there's a lot of things that Isaac has done to help bring those things out of me, and which I've also shared. But as a couple, you have to be okay with letting each other shine. There can't be jealousy there, and you have to be okay with being supportive. And as a family, if you want to grow as a couple, as a family, because we have a daughter as well,
yes,
who also has a calling on her life.
Yes.
We have to include all of us. We have to include all of us in ministry.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that we can all grow together. Because if not, and we're leaving any one of us behind, then they don't go anywhere. They stay in the same spot.
It ain't worth it. So grow together. Tip number 2, learn to fight fair. So
this one, when we came up with the list of what we wanted to talk about for this video, Isaac, we talked about, we wanted to do 12. And so we sat down, we both put together one big list, and then we kind of picked and chose. But one thing that we wanted to think about when we were picking what we wanted to say or what we wanted to talk about is what kind of things that we've kind of picked up along the way of our marriage that have always kind of stuck with us, and things that we've put into practice that we feel like have helped us. And years ago, we went to a marriage conference, and one whole segment of the marriage conference was talking about learning how to fight fair. And I feel like that's something that's really important to learn, because in marriage, you're so close to your spouse. You're always together, right? You sleep together in the same bed, in the same room. And sometimes there's friction there. And not only that with friction, we also become vulnerable.
Yeah.
We have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, because we see each other's flaws, we see each other's moods throughout the day, and we know what buttons to push.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we fight, it's easy to just pop off.
Yeah, I think I know how to upset you. I mean, I don't intentionally do it, but I think I could upset her if I really wanted to.
Well, see, so that's our nature. When we fight, when we're upset, we take little jabs. And one thing that they talked about was when you're fighting, not to hit below the belt.
Yep.
We know each other's triggers. We know, you know how to talk to me in a way that is going to make me upset. I know the same with you. And I do. Now I do. As long as it's been, now I do.
12 years.
But it's so easy to do when we're upset. And that's something that shouldn't want to do because it doesn't help. It only makes the situation worse because then you have all these moods flying around and then added moods flying around on top of it. And it just makes a big, ugly mess. So now we're going to move on to tip number 3. And that is to choose who you let to speak into your marriage wisely.
This one is important. Listen.
It's funny because, like I said, we're putting this list together. So we've already been kind of days leading up to this, planning on what we want. And this is something that I feel very strongly about. And I think it's because early on in our marriage, somebody had sat me down and told me this. They gave me this advice. And I saw why it was a good thing pretty early on.
Found out real quick.
Because I actually had... So when we got married, we were young. Isaac was 17. I was 18.
Oh, babies.
And I had a friend who I confided in. I don't even remember. Like I was watching an old video on Facebook that I did myself where I talked about this.
Yeah.
But I asked a friend for advice. Not asked her for advice, but I confided in her because something happened. I don't even remember what it was. And I said in the video, it's probably something dumb because if it wasn't, I probably would remember. But I don't even remember. But I was upset. And so I went to hang out with her and she's like, hey, what's wrong? So I was telling her, because we already had a friendship. I already trusted her.
Yeah.
So I told her what was going on.
Absolutely.
And right away she's like, oh no, you need to leave him. And I was kind of like,
What?
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Bruh.
But okay. Not okay like I was going to leave him, but just like, oh, okay. And prior to this, I had that advice given to me already about being careful of who I confided in because of what could happen.
And it's not like I was doing anything super crazy. It's not like I was cheating or anything like that.
It was something small, and I was just mad.
Yeah.
I think we were mad at each other.
She was just in her feelings. I better be careful.
Yeah, be careful. But so I confided in the friend. She said that, and I was kind of like, okay, I see why. Like I see why.
Yeah.
And so yesterday, actually, I was on Instagram, saw a video pop up from Lisa Bevere, and she was talking about getting advice about marriage. And she said, don't take advice from somebody who isn't somewhere that you want to be.
Ooh,
and when I heard that, it really struck a chord because because I was like, that's true. Like you want to talk to somebody who is in a place where you want your marriage to be.
Yeah.
Because and this is another reason why that I believe it's so important who you choose to get advice from when you really, really need it, like in critical times that you need it. Because when people are giving you advice and it's advice that you take in and you put it into practice in your marriage, they're sowing seeds into your marriage. They're doing more than just telling you what they think you should do.
Yeah. They're
sowing into your life and into your marriage.
Yeah.
So you really want to look at what kind of person that person is, because what kind of seeds are they sowing or are they planting into your heart that is open and vulnerable because you feel like you need to seek help? Because there's nothing wrong with needing to seek help. But you really want to look at who it is that you're talking to and who it is that you're listening to and taking nuggets here and there to put into your life.
So just be careful, because there'll also be somebody probably plotting on your marriage, waiting for you to fail. Be careful. So tip number 4, and I like this one. I had to learn it. Okay, so I'm still learning. Your boy's still growing 12 years later into this thing called marriage. Okay, I'll be serious. So number 4, take time to learn your spouse's love language. All right. So for those of you that don't know, there's actually this thing called love language, and we all have it. Ours is different. There's actually assessment tests that you could take online. It just takes a few minutes. You answer these questions and it tells you what type of love language that you have. So if you don't know your spouse's love language, take a test. They have them online for free. I don't know. Maybe I'll put something in the description. Take it, because it's very important, because the way that I feel loved isn't necessarily the way that my wife feels loved.
It's funny because when I think about when we actually took that test, because it was only like a few years ago, I feel like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Recently.
Yeah. And our love languages were totally opposite. Like I think there's maybe like 5 categories of different types of love language. And I think I scored 2. My 2 highest ones were the exact same. And then your whatever 2 that I had, you had 2 different ones.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of like figure out, because if we don't take the time to learn that, sometimes there's needs that are unmet. Yeah. And I'm walking around feeling unfulfilled and unloved. And then, you're walking around feeling the same way and we don't even know.
So here's an example. My wife's love language is quality time and physical touch. Like me, I'm a little bit different. I don't necessarily need the physical touch. However, I do value the quality time. I love spending time with my wife, but it's like my love language is different. I don't need her to hug on me or to touch me to know that she loves me. I just know that she does. And so I can't take that same idea and think that applies to her, because then if I'm not showing that physical touch, if I'm not spending that quality of time, that starts affecting her. And so that's what we're talking about right there. And so it's me trying to be more intentional, like, hey, baby, I love you, you know what I mean? Or give her a hug or hold her hand, simple things like that speaks volumes to her, and she really appreciates it. So those are the type of things that we're talking about. It's very important to understand and find out what your spouse's love language is and try to accommodate to that.
Okay, so we're going to move on to tip number 5. I feel like this is going to be a little controversial.
Maybe.
Maybe.
We like
maybe not.
Is that
a word?
No. Okay.
Okay, so tip number 5. A lot of people have heard the phrase happy wife, happy life. And we like to use the phrase happy spouse, happy house.
So we added this one in there because I feel like it's not like marriage is not just dependent on one person's happiness, but both of y'all.
We believe that in order for our marriage to work and for us to both be happy, that we both need to be fulfilled.
Yes.
Whether that has to do with like hobbies that we like or ministry, something that makes us feel fulfilled, things that we want to pursue. It's not dictated by me and it's not dictated by him. It's there. We're constantly sitting together and talking about things like, okay, where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And it's never like, not to say like it's not what you want, because those are things we do also talk about.
Right.
But when we make decisions together. It's not ever like I'm just going to do what I want because I'm the wife and I can. And he's never doing that either. Like, well, I'm the head of the household. I'm the husband, which he is. And I honor him as that. But he doesn't use that title as an excuse to dictate all of the decisions that we make just because he's the husband. We believe in honoring each other. And that also plays into like, well, no, it's not just you or me. It's both of us. And so we both have to be fulfilled and we both have to honor each other in order to for our marriage to last and to work.
Okay, so now moving on to tip number 6, have the tough conversations. So what I've learned is that holding in things for too long could be very toxic. So like having those tough conversations, like if there's something bothering you, like just don't just hold it in, because if you hold it in, I feel like all the little things you hold in end up exploding. Then these little things turn into a big things because you just holding it in. It's good. I've learned that it's good to talk to my wife and to tell her things and to also be like vulnerable with her. Me personally, I feel better being able to lay some things off my chest rather than just holding it in, being frustrated and just exploding. So understand that we have to have these tough conversations because they can end up just blowing up in our face.
I feel like this is something that we've barely started to kind of tap into, having a flow of how those conversations go with us.
Yeah.
Because before I wouldn't say anything. And I think it's probably something that I struggled with more than you, because I would
maybe equal.
I would hold things in for very, very long amounts of time.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say anything, like I said, because I don't want to deal with, I felt like for a while, anytime we talked, like, then it would be something we'd end up fighting about. And then we have to circle back and kind of talk about it again. And sometimes I didn't want to, depending on what the subject was, I didn't want to do that.
Right.
And so I had to come to a place where I was okay with doing that, because after a while I started to feel like I was just going crazy.
Yeah.
And eventually, if I would go long enough without saying anything and without talking, then it would just kind of like blow up in my face. And then I'd end up kind of just having a meltdown. It's not healthy. So and like I said, now I think we've kind of come to a place where circumstances have made us have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And now that we've learned that, it's easier now because we kind of have, we kind of know like when one of us needs to talk.
Right.
And when we do that, it's easier to, there's no room for like unmet needs.
Right.
Emotionally.
If you're open,
if you're open. And if you allow yourself to be open for your spouse to do that.
Yes.
It brings you closer together.
So tip number 7, and this kind of ties into what we were just talking about, is that respect your spouse's weaknesses and insecurities and do not use them against them. So this one's a little bit kind of just self-explanatory. It's just respect each other's weaknesses. If you know like your spouse is insecure or they don't like certain jokes or they don't like, just different things, why play on it? Why provoke them? Why upset them? Sometimes it's just not worth it. Sometimes it's just better just to keep your comments to yourself and move on. You're supposed to be helping each other out in those weaknesses, not necessarily putting each other down. We shouldn't be doing that, but we should be lifting each other up. Which brings me to our next point is number 8, and this is very vital for a marriage, is don't disrespect each other in front of friends, families, kids, anybody. Don't disrespect each other in front of people. So no spouse slander. Don't go on Facebook talking about your spouse. Just try to work it out. If you need to go seek a counselor or you need to talk to somebody, go talk to them. But don't spouse shame because you're probably going to regret it. So moving on to tip number 9 is be your spouse's safe place.
In the marriage relationship as a spouse, there are so many roles that we take on for our spouse. Depending on what kind of marriage that we have, we can be a good type of role or a bad type of role, depending on where your relationship is at and what things look like. I have a little story time. There was a time where I felt very alone. I dealt with a lot of bad things in my mind, that just a lot of junk that I needed to work through. There was a time where I remember coming home from work. I had been at work all day, and I remember even having a tough few days at work. And I remember going into work kind of just being there and not really talking to anybody and just kind of not wanting to be there, but like not wanting to go home. And then going home, this had went on for a few days. And I remember I had a huge headache and I went home, and I don't know if I just kind of went, at that time in my life, it's such a blur. I feel like I was just kind of going through motions and just doing what I needed to do. There was a lot on my plate at the time and a lot emotionally that I was trying to work through. And I remember when we went to bed, Isaac was already laying down. I went and I laid down. And I remember like experiencing not even really wanting to lay down for a long while. I had a bad habit of going and sleeping on our couch. If I felt like I needed space, I would just go sleep on the couch. And sometime throughout the night, Isaac would come back and get me. I remember feeling like that, and I didn't do it. I think that was probably the first time where I had felt like doing it, and I didn't. And I remember I laid down, and I think I remember even that day, like us not really talking very much, kind of just like, hey, how was work? Oh, it was good. Oh, that's good. And then like we had dinner, got Jada in bed for school and stuff like that. And I remember laying down, and Isaac doesn't do this. I don't think he's ever done it again. But I remember like laying down and you put your arm around me. And so I remember I said I had a headache. and he put his arm around me. And when he put his arm, and so the other thing too, I think that ties into this is the physical touch thing, because that is, I see it. And after taking that test and seeing it, I was like, oh, I get it.
Right.
But I remember laying down and you put your arm around me like this. Like if it's hard to like show it, but like I was laying down and you put your arm around me like this, but this part of your arm was somehow covered like my whole face. And he wasn't like smothering me, but you put your arm around me and it covered like my whole face, so my whole face was covered and I had my eyes closed. And it sounds funny, and sometimes I'm like, I think there was a time a couple months ago where I had said like, man, can you just do that again? And you didn't know what I meant. But I remember going from feeling the way that I felt, because I felt super ugly, not like appearance wise, but inside. Like I just felt so much junk, and I could feel it. And when he put his arm around me and just had it over my face like this, I felt God speak to me, and he said, "This is your safe place." And I was like, oh. And I remember I just kind of stayed there, and I was just like, okay. And I fell asleep. I don't think we still didn't talk after that.
This is the first time I heard this story.
and I think since then, I feel like that opened a lot in me. That was like, well, yeah, he is. And like I said, depending on where our marriage is at, I don't think I've never shared, like he said, I don't think I ever shared that story with him. And that's why, that explains why I had a headache one day, and this was like within the past couple months, and I had said like, can you just put your arm around me, like around my head the way you did that one time? And he was just kind of like, okay. And you didn't do it, but that's probably why, because that moment for me was so significant. And I don't think I had ever said that to you. And I don't think I've shared it with anybody else either. But I think also because it was something that I heard God speak to me, that I was kind of like, it's true. Yeah. And so, I mean, and that's ultimately, that's what we should be with our spouses. We should be a safe place where, like you said, for us to be able to be vulnerable with each other and to not judge each other for being vulnerable with each other or for our weaknesses. We should be.
So that was a cool story to hear. So moving on to tip number 10 is we are on the same team. So it kind of ties into what she was saying, is that your spouse is not your enemy. And maybe there's times that they are your enemy. Maybe you guys didn't get along, but it shouldn't be that way. You guys should be a team and trying to work things out. Seek counseling if you have to. Like don't wait until your marriage is like literally about to just fall off the edge before you seek help. I suggest you do it as soon as you feel like you need it, and before things could even get worse. So remember, you're on the same team. So now tip number 11 is be intentional with spending time with each other. What did you say the other day? You heard something on social media about like don't stop dating. Don't stop dating.
That's what it was.
Don't stop dating your spouse. Spend time with each other. Sometimes we get like busy, like even like the latter part of this year, we're doing a lot. I was traveling, rapping at a lot of places, and we had to pick days to where we just had to spend time with each other. And that would just look like going to the gym together. That would look like cruising around, go to McDonald's, parking in a parking lot, and just talking in our vehicle inside of parking lot. Like, it's just simple things. Like, you don't have to even go like on a fancy date. You can, and that's always nice. Like, I'm not against going on fancy dates. If you got the means to do it, do it. But the thing that really matters about all of that is just spending the quality time with your spouse. Like, you already got them, but now you got to maintain that relationship. Like, just because you got your significant other doesn't mean that you don't have to keep them. No, spend that quality time with them. So here is our final tip. And remember, these tips aren't in recommended order. We just wrote down a list and brought it to you. So it brings us to our final tip. Tip number 12 is serve without expectations. Hold no records. So for instance, now I'm going somewhere with this. For instance, we ought to serve each other. We do things for each other, and we don't keep counts like, okay, I did this, so now you got to do this. I did this much effort, so now you got to put this much effort. No, we should just be able just to be doing things for each other. I don't keep track of how many times my wife throws the trash. I don't keep track of like, hey, I threw this trash 5 times. Now you got to throw it 5 times just so we're equal. You know what I mean? No, it's just like, no, we just serve each other and help each other out, because our marriage, we build that together. Everything that we build is together. And so I can't trying to hold a record book, be like, no, I did this on this day at Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. and or whatever, something ridiculous like that. Nah, just serve each other. So we're gonna go ahead and just conclude this video. Thank you guys. If you watched this to the end, we appreciate y'all. Give us that thumbs up. Share it with somebody. You never know if a marriage is going through something and they need to hear this message. So we appreciate y'all watching. We have More Than a Minute podcast. We out.